Welcome to the Book Party Podcast.
Join us as we journey into the world of books with Michael T.
Prepare to be captivated by engaging interviews, insightful discussions, and fascinating stories. You'll discover new adventures and gain insight into the creative process of the authors themselves as they share their struggles and accomplishments. Now let's hear from Michael T.
This is Michael T., and I thank you for being with us this morning. I would invite you to go to bookpartypodcast.com and hit that subscribe tab on top. Scroll down to the icon of your choice where you can find us on one of your favorite platforms, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or Audacity, where you can download and follow us there. Please don't forget to sign up for our newsletter and catch us on your latest information for our upcoming shows. Today, I would like to introduce our guest, Edward Di Gangi, and his book, The Gift Best Given. Adopted at birth, Edward was born and raised in New York City. Although he knew for most of his life that he was adopted, it wasn't until he approached his 70th birthday that he began to search for his identity of his birth mother. His journey and the many surprising discoveries he made as he searched, as he encountered in his memoir, The Best Given. Edward and his wife now live in Hillsborough, North Carolina. He is a popular book club presenter and podcast guest. The Gift Best Given is his first full-length book. Edward, why don't you take it from here, fill in the blanks a bit, and tell our listeners about yourself.
Michael, thank you so much for inviting me onto the podcast today. I really appreciate that. I've had a pretty varied career. I'm now 75 years old. Probably should have paid more attention in school, but I came out okay. You know, I went to good school. I took away just about as much as I needed, and I've had a real interesting journey since. A varied career, as I said. The bulk of my career has been involved in leading large groups of people. I managed inbound telephone call centers, both for the airlines, for the transportation industry, the communication industry, and in healthcare. And when you get those large groups of people, you get tons of stories. Any place there are people, there are stories that come along with them. So, you know, I've got a lot that I lean back on there. As far as interests outside of work, I'm a published songwriter. And back in 1968, I think, I had a song published in Broadside magazine, which was then the leading journal with topical songs, and it was the birthplace for people like Bob Dylan and Phil Oakes and Tom Paxton. And you know, I take great pride in one day, you know, I got the copy of the magazine delivered to my house, and there was my name above Bob Dylan's. But it was also a very, very democratic institution, so everything was done alphabetically. I'm a fly fisherman. I've been as far as Eastern Russia fly fishing. I had a great time there. I'm thinking that maybe someplace no American ever fishes again. You know, is on the Kamchatka Peninsula, which is right out on the if you follow the Aleutian Islands out of Alaska, you wind up into Kamchatka. And then also a qualified national triathlon championship person as well, and have banged up my body enough that I've pretty well retired from that. So, you know, when I retired, I pursued a lot of different interests, but the one that really consumed me for the past several years has been the writing of the book, The Gift Best Given. And now I'm working on a sequel to that story as well.
Well, on your journey with your book, your publishing journey, did you decide to go on a publishing journey as a self-publishing author, or through an agency as an agency journey, or somewhere in between? How did you decide to do that?
Michael, when I started this journey, I really knew nothing. And I worked very hard to self-educate myself. And my first thoughts were, you used to hear the stories about the authors who would get big advances from publishers, and I thought I needed one of those. So I wound up querying a total of 83 different agents. 81 of those agents never responded. Two of them did, and they essentially went nowhere. So I moved on and I started looking at small press and hybrid publishers. And at that point, as I said, I was working very hard on educating myself. And I realized there was very little that they could give me that I could not provide for myself. So I think you've used the term before of collaborator, and that's essentially what I am. I produced the intellectual property, but then I went out and I found myself a good editor. I had a very good friend who was a graphic artist, and he did my cover design, and went across the world to Australia and through recommendation found a book formatter there. And at a given point, I was sitting with a completed manuscript, fully edited, and all of the artwork and all of the formatting done and in my hands. And I was ready to go then as an independent publisher.
Okay. So did you go the route of uploading it yourself, like in KDP, or how did you do that?
Well, I made a decision to go wide with my publishing. The instinctive thing, and I've certainly followed it to a good degree, is to publish with Amazon because they make it very easy with Kindle Direct Publishing. But if you go with Amazon, it sets you up with some limitations, just that retail bookstores and libraries will not deal with Amazon just because Amazon doesn't discount their products, and retailers and libraries expect that. So, in addition to Amazon, I went out to publish with Ingram Spark, which is one of the biggest commercial publishers or printers and distributors of books, as well as one of the other aggregators that are out there, and managed to get my book published not only on Amazon and available through Amazon, but also widely available to those retailers and to the libraries that I was interested in.
In your writing of the book, take us to a point of what you would consider your worst author moment.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking with my wife about that this morning because I I thought about it and I said, gee, I said, I really have not had a worst moment, I don't think. This has been a really, really joyous journey in terms of cooperation and generosity from other people. But I think the one that really stuck out to me is my book was scheduled to be published in May of 2020. And that's right about the height, or we thought at the moment that it was the height of COVID. And I was sitting there with a book in my hand ready to go and COVID out there and not really knowing what to do. And the advice that I received is, hey, this will be over very shortly. Hold your book till September. And ultimately I decided, no, let's go plotting ahead. And I am very grateful that I did that because, as you know, in September of 2020, COVID was not behind us. We were still dealing with it. So I was looking for alternative ways to publicize and market my book, and and largely was quite successful with that. The entire COVID period was really very good for publishers and for writers.
COVID was a time where people were staying home and reading,
Absolutely,
you know.
absolutely correct.
So it was a good time to write, and it, it turned out to be a good time for that. Absolutely. Well,
Yeah,
take us
sometimes
to a point. Let's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say sometimes you just need to follow instinct.
Exactly.
The people who told me don't do it were professionals who a couple of months later were scrambling to catch up. So I was happy
Right.
with the decision I made.
Well, let's flip the coin a little bit. Let's instead of a hard time, take us to a point in time when you're writing that maybe this incredible light bulb, this aha moment, this epiphany moment where you're doing something other than writing, and all of a sudden this light bulb goes off in your head. I call it an epiphany moment. And all of a sudden, this wow, oh man, I got to grab a pen and write this down. I got to write it down right now. Do you have a moment like that in your book?
Yeah, I can't say that it was a sit down and write it down moment. It really goes back and ties to that decision of deciding to roll the book out. And if COVID had not happened, I think I would have still been at that same place. It was that going through that process of not hearing back from agents, of looking at the small presses, looking at the hybrid publishers, and finally coming out and saying, you know what, even if I was fortunate enough to land a deal with a traditional publisher, those usually take a year, 2 years sometimes to wrap up, and then it's another 2 years, sometimes 3 years for the book to get out in print. I was sitting there thinking, okay, you were at your 70th birthday or 73rd birthday at that point, actually. And I said, you don't have time to wait. I said, let's go and let's get it done right now. And that's when I made that decision to go out and to independently publish the book.
Right. Okay. Well, let's go to today. What is the one thing that you're the most fired up about or excited about now today?
Right this moment, and I just did it just a little while ago, I was taking photographs of the new large print edition of my book that just arrived. And I've made the
Okay.
decision. The book was published in digital format and in typical soft cover, and I am in the process of distributing the large print book for library use. And libraries are big consumers of large print. Large print it's an expensive process, and it's not the type of thing that the majority of people will purchase for themselves to put on their bookshelves, but libraries do. Our local library probably has six rows of large print books on the shelf, and they're wonderful, for people with compromised eyesight. And I opened the book and said, boy, this is really easy. This makes for very pleasurable reading. So I'm excited about that. The other thing I'm very excited about is in the same process, I have published a deluxe hardcover with dust jacket edition of the book, and I'm expecting the first proof of that in the next day or two. So I'm looking forward to that and getting back out with those books. Number one, marketing to libraries. Number two, marketing that hardcover book.
Well, this is Michael T. Thank you for being with us this morning. We invite you to go to bookpartypodcast.com, hit that subscribe tab on top, scroll down to the icon of your choice, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or Odyssey, where you can find us on one of your favorite platforms. You can download and follow us there, and please leave a review. Now we are going to enter the lightning round. I have 4 pointed questions for 4 pointed answers. Before you were an author, before you started penning a book, what was holding you back from becoming an author?
Michael, I guess it was the fact that I never thought I had a story to tell. I had a friend who would always poke me and say, you really need to write a book. And I would tell him about various things I had done over my career and in my hobbies, but I never felt that it was a story worthy of a book. All of a sudden, when I stepped into this arena of searching for my birth mother, the story was there, or the journey was there, and I then had the story to research and to record and to tell.
Right. Okay. When you were writing, as you were writing your book, what was the best advice you had ever received?
The best advice, I think, in the entire process, I'm a big podcast listener, and that's how I became acquainted with you. One of the other podcasts uses a tagline of "There are no more gatekeepers," And that told me that I didn't need to wait for agents. I didn't need to wait for publishers. I could go out and I could go into the public with the book that was in my hand and start to market and sell from there.
That's correct. Share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success.
Perseverance, absolutely perseverance. This is something where nothing happens easily. Anybody who publishes a book these days is running an independent business because they own every piece of it. So you've got to stick with it.
Okay. Share an internet resource that you can share with our listeners that you use in your writing.
Yeah, I've got two, if you'd allow me. The first one is I use Grammarly, and I use the free edition, which is just real good for checking spelling and grammar. I edit pretty well as I go along, but I run my manuscript through Grammarly, and all of a sudden you see the red highlights pop up, and they're the places you want to go back to and look a second time. The other is kind of and I think a different kind of site or place. When I'm writing about places and writing about people, I'll very often go to eBay and type in the place or type in the person. And it's remarkable what will pop up there in terms of old photographs, postcards, documents, books. And I've found a lot of revelations there, things I would not have found otherwise.
Well, Edward, we're now going to go into the grand finale. Why don't you tell our listeners a way that they maybe can get in touch with you or follow you and find your book, but then take your time and just tell our listeners about your book.
Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate that opportunity. I do have a website. It's digangiauthor.com, and that's D like David, I, G like George, AN like Nancy, GI, author.com. And it has information about the book itself, about myself, opportunities to purchase books, copies of the book in different formats online. I also have a presence on Facebook and on Instagram, both of those at Di Gangi Author. The book itself, probably the most important part here is The Gift Best Given, a memoir. As I said, it's currently available in softcover and in ebook formats. It's available in most public libraries in digital format, either in Hoopla or with Libby. So you can download a digital version using a library card. And as I said, coming very, very soon is the large print edition and a hardcover edition as well. Talking about the book itself, I talk about the book as being a story of adoption, search, discovery, and reunion. And I was adopted at a day old, and I knew about my adoption pretty much for as long as I've been alive, or at least early in my childhood. And I had always assumed that my birth mother was the typical high school girl who unfortunately became pregnant, was sent away someplace to give birth to a baby, and the baby was taken from her. And when I went searching for her identity, I found that something very different was the case. I found out my mother was not a high school girl. She was 23 at the time that I was born. And she was a celebrity performer in the big ice skating shows in the 1940s and the 1950s. Ice Follies, Ice Vogues, Holiday on Ice. And she had a career where she traveled all over the United States, all over the Caribbean, South America, and Europe. And it became a very, very, very interesting journey at that point. So I was fortunate in being able to find her identity, and that's part of the story. And the fact that she was a public figure gave me access to information about her that otherwise I might not otherwise have found. Sadly,
Right.
when I came to the end of my journey, I learned that my birth mother had passed away 3 years before I began my search. But I was able to meet my maternal half-brother. My mother married 7 years after I was born, and she had 2 sons. I met one of those sons and remain in fairly close contact with him. Uh, at the same time that I began the search, I submitted a DNA sample, and it was intended for nothing else other than to determine my ethnicity. My adoptive parents, my adoptive father was Sicilian, my adoptive mother was Ukrainian, and I was curious to see what I truly was. So I submitted that DNA sample, and it came back with a pie chart that said, by and large, I had Eastern European roots. But it also gave me a list of, probably about 1,000 DNA relatives. And at the top of the list was a name that I did not recognize. And by that time, I knew pretty much all about my birth mother's family. So when I went and dug in deeper, I found out that this person was my paternal half-brother. And I've been in touch with him. We visited. He's out in San Francisco. I'm on the East Coast. And he told me a great deal about our father. My belief is that my birth father never knew I existed. He and my mother, I believe, had a summer romance while she was in San Francisco with the Ice Follies in 1947. She left town, and it wasn't until later that she realized she was pregnant. And I don't believe that she ever looked back, and I don't believe that she ever reached out to him. So it filled in a blank for me. I'd never much thought about who my birth father was, but it's something that I was happy to know. So it completed the book, meeting both of those brothers. I've met several first cousins and have a very nice relationship with them. The family, all in all, has been exceptionally welcoming. My belief and everyone else's belief in the family is that no one in the family ever knew that my mother was pregnant, never knew about my birth. She kept it as a well-guarded secret. And I count myself quite fortunate. She took my birth and my adoption very seriously. And by the time she was ready to give birth, she had a list of the things that she wanted somebody to be able to offer to me and as adoptive parents. And and I could tell you they gave me every one of them. I was terribly fortunate with the people who adopted me, and that's one of the reasons that it took so long before I ever thought to go out and look. So the gift best given is available widely. It's available through every bookstore. If it's not on the shelf, it can be ordered. It can be ordered as a signed copy off of my website. It's available through every online retailer. And as I mentioned before, it's available in libraries, both through Libby and Hoopla. And many libraries do have the print book on the shelves as well.
Wow, that's great. Well, Edward, we thank you so much for being here with us today, opening up to us, and I'm sure our listeners appreciate that too. So this is Michael T., and I thank you for being with us this morning. To all our listeners, I invite you again to go to bookpartypodcast.com, hit that subscribe tab on top, scroll down to the icon of your choice where you can find us on your favorite platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or Odyssey. You can download one and follow us there. Please leave us a review. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter to get the latest information on our upcoming shows. Book Party Podcast is owned and powered by MTM Legacy Publishing, LLC. This is Michael T. signing off.
You must not miss our next episode as we delve into a world of inspiration, entertainment, and thought-provoking insights. Join Michael T. on the next Book Party Podcast and experience a new adventure, a new story, and a complete immersion into the world of Pages Unveiled, Chronicles of the Writing Journey.